What happens when a self-made millionaire's carefully controlled world is turned upside down by an unexpected visitor? Picture this: James Donovan, a man who has spent his entire life chasing success, finds himself face to face with a little girl in a high-end Manhattan restaurant. She's clutching a napkin, her green eyes wide with hope, and she claims to be his daughter. How will James respond? And more importantly, how will this encounter change his life forever? Stay tuned, because this story is just getting started. James Donovan sits at one of the center tables, his posture rigid, exuding an air of authority that commands respect, or perhaps fear, from those around him. He's dressed impeccably in a tailored navy blue suit, his tie perfectly knotted, not a single strand of his salt and pepper hair out of place. Across from him are two business partners, Richard, a tall man with sharp features and an even sharper mind, and Sarah, whose red lipstick contrasts sharply against her pale skin as she leans forward intently. They're discussing a multi-million-dollar merger, their voices low but charged with tension. Papers are spread across the table, charts and graphs detailing projections for the next fiscal year. James listens carefully, his icy blue eyes scanning each document before nodding curtly or offering a brief critique. His tone is clipped, efficient, devoid of emotion. "James, calmly, we need to finalize these numbers by tomorrow morning. No delays. This deal could make or break us." Richard nods quickly, scribbling notes on a legal pad. Sarah adjusts her glasses, her expression thoughtful yet wary. "Sarah, understood. But we'll have to address the board's concerns about potential risks." Before she can finish, a small voice interrupts, cutting through the hushed atmosphere like a knife slicing through silk. "Emma," softly, "excuse me, sir." Everyone freezes. James turns his head slowly, his brow furrowing as he takes in the sight before him. Standing beside his table is a little girl, no older than 8. She has wavy brown hair that falls just past her shoulders, framing a face dominated by wide, piercing green eyes that seem far too wise for her age. Her cheeks are flushed, whether from nervousness or excitement, it's hard to tell. In her hands, she clutches a napkin, twisting it anxiously. James blinks, momentarily thrown off balance. He glances around the room, searching for her parents, but there's no sign of anyone accompanying her. His frown deepens. "James, calm but firm, are you lost?" Emma hesitates, her gaze dropping to the floor for a moment. Then, gathering what seems like every ounce of courage she possesses, she steps closer to the table. She extends her arm hesitantly, revealing a crescent-shaped birthmark on her pale wrist. It's unmistakable, a perfect curve, almost like a sliver of the moon etched into her skin. Emma, whispering, "My mom told me, if I ever find someone with this birthmark, he might be my dad." Time seems to stop. For a split second, James feels as though the ground beneath him has shifted. His heart pounds in his chest, loud enough that he's sure everyone in the room must hear it. His fingers twitch involuntarily, brushing against the cuff of his sleeve where his own identical birthmark lies hidden. He stares at the girl, his mind racing. Who is she? How does she know about the mark? And why now? Questions flood his thoughts, but his lips remain sealed. Speechless, he simply sits there, his usually unshakable composure shattered. The silence stretches uncomfortably. Richard clears his throat, breaking the spell. Richard, awkwardly, James, do you want me to call security?" But James doesn't respond. Instead, he leans back slightly in his chair, studying Emma more closely. There's something familiar about her, the shape of her eyes, the way her hair curls at the ends. Could it be possible? Could this child really be his? Emma shifts nervously under his scrutiny, clutching the napkin tighter. Her voice trembles when she speaks again. "Emma, I didn't mean to bother you. Mom said I should try, if I ever saw someone with the same mark." Her words trail off, leaving the sentence unfinished. James finally finds his voice, though it comes out quieter than usual. "James, what's your name?" Emma looks up, meeting his gaze for the first time. There's a flicker of hope in her eyes, fragile but undeniable. "Emma, Emma. My name is Emma." For a long moment, James says nothing. The weight of the situation presses down on him, heavy and suffocating. Around them, the restaurant buzzes with activity, oblivious to the life-altering exchange taking place at this one table. Finally, James exhales slowly, his decision made. "James, softly, sit down, Emma. Let's talk." As Emma pulls out a chair and climbs onto it, James gestures for Richard and Sarah to give them some privacy. They gather their papers and retreat, casting curious glances over their shoulders as they leave. The music swells slightly in the background, underscoring the gravity of the moment. And so begins a journey neither James nor Emma could have anticipated, a collision of worlds, secrets, and truths waiting to be uncovered. James stares at Emma, his mind reeling as if caught in a storm. The restaurant around them fades into a blur of soft lighting and distant murmurs. His thoughts race, trying to piece together the impossible puzzle before him. Could this child, this girl with her wide green eyes and trembling voice, really be his? He shakes his head slightly, almost imperceptibly, as though denying it will make the moment disappear. "James," quietly, disbelief coloring his tone, "what did you say your name was again?" Emma tilts her head, studying him carefully. There's something about the way she looks at him, as if she's searching for answers he doesn't even know how to give. "Emma, Emma. My mom called me Emma." Her words hang in the air between them, heavy with meaning. James swallows hard, his throat dry despite the glass of water sitting untouched on the table. He forces himself to ask the question burning in his chest, though part of him dreads the answer. "James, and your mother? What's her name?" Emma hesitates, her small hands gripping the napkin tighter. For a brief second, James wonders if she'll change her mind, if she'll turn and run back to wherever she came from. But then she speaks, her voice steady now, carrying a weight far beyond her years. "Emma, Claire. Claire Bennett." The name hits James like a punch to the gut. His breath catches, and for a split second, he feels unmoored, as though the ground beneath him has shifted. Claire. The name alone is enough to send memories flooding back, memories he spent years burying deep inside. Claire Bennett. His first love. The woman who had believed in him when no one else did, who had seen past the ambition and drive that consumed him. And the woman he'd walked away from without looking back, convinced that love and family were distractions he couldn't afford. James stiffens visibly, his jaw tightening. He glances around the room again, half expecting Claire to appear out of nowhere, laughing at some elaborate prank. But there's only Emma, watching him with those piercing green eyes that mirror Claire's so perfectly it hurts. "James," hoarsely, "where is she? Where's Claire?" Emma's lower lip trembles, and for the first time, tears well up in her eyes. She blinks rapidly, trying to hold them back, but one escapes, sliding down her cheek. "Emma, she died last month." The words land like a thunderclap, reverberating through James's entire being. Dead. Claire is dead. The realization crashes over him like a tidal wave, pulling him under. Guilt surges within him, sharp and suffocating. All the years wasted, all the chances missed. He hadn't spoken to her since they parted ways nearly a decade ago. Not once. He'd been too busy building his empire, chasing success, convincing himself that emotions were weaknesses to be overcome. Now, staring at this little girl who claims to be his daughter, he can't escape the crushing weight of regret. "James," softly, almost to himself, "I didn't know." Emma wipes at her face with the back of her hand, sniffling quietly. "Emma, Mom always said you were important. That you worked hard. She never said anything bad about you." Her words are simple, innocent, yet they cut deeper than any accusation ever could. James feels exposed, vulnerable in a way he hasn't felt in years. He clenches his fists beneath the table, struggling to maintain control. Across the room, his business partners linger near the bar, whispering amongst themselves. Richard shoots him a pointed look, clearly expecting him to dismiss the girl and return to their meeting. After all, what does a CEO have to do with an unexpected child claiming kinship during a high-stakes negotiation? But James can't bring himself to send her away. Something in Emma's presence anchors him, forcing him to confront the life he's built, and the pieces he's left behind. A waiter approaches cautiously, sensing the tension radiating from the table. Waiter, awkwardly, "Sir, should I escort the young lady to the front?" James doesn't respond immediately. Instead, he studies Emma again, taking in every detail, the curve of her smile, the nervous way she twists the napkin in her lap. She looks so much like Claire it's uncanny. How could he not see it before? Finally, after what feels like an eternity, James exhales slowly, his decision made. James, firmly, "No. She's with me." The waiter nods quickly, backing away without another word. Emma blinks up at James, surprise flickering across her face. "Emma, you mean, you believe me?" James leans forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. His expression softens, just a fraction, as he meets her gaze. "James, I don't know what to believe right now. But I'm not sending you away." Emma lets out a shaky breath, relief washing over her features. She relaxes marginally, though her grip on the napkin remains tight. James gestures toward the empty chair beside her. "James, sit. We need to talk." As Emma settles into the seat, James signals for the waiter to bring her a drink. Then, leaning back in his own chair, he takes a moment to gather his thoughts. This isn't just a disruption to his evening, it's a disruption to everything he thought he knew about his life. For the first time in years, James Donovan feels utterly unprepared. The waiter returns with a glass of apple juice, placing it gently in front of Emma. She murmurs a quiet, "Thank you," her fingers tracing the rim of the glass as though seeking comfort in its cool surface. James watches her intently, his mind racing. This child, this girl who claims to be his daughter, is sitting across from him, fragile and uncertain, yet carrying an air of resilience that reminds him so much of Claire. James leans forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table. His tone is measured but tinged with urgency. "James, Emma, where have you been staying since your mom passed away?" Emma takes a sip of her juice before answering, her voice soft but steady. "Emma, with Miss Karen. She lives next door to us, where Mom and I used to live. She's really nice. She said I could stay with her for a while." James nods slowly, absorbing the information. But there's something in the way she says, "for a while," that catches his attention. "James, and after that? What happens when you can't stay with her anymore?" Emma hesitates, her gaze dropping to her lap. She fidgets with the hem of her sweater, clearly uncomfortable with the question. "Emma, I don't know. Miss Karen's really old, and she says she can't take care of me forever. She's been helping me look at other options." Her words trail off, leaving an unspoken heaviness hanging in the air. Other options. Foster care. The system. James feels a knot tighten in his stomach. He knows what those options might entail: uncertainty, instability, a life far removed from the one he's built for himself. He sits back in his chair, running a hand over his face. For all his success, all his wealth and influence, he's never faced a challenge quite like this. A child. His child. Or at least, someone who very well might be. James exhales sharply, making a decision without fully realizing it. Whatever doubts or questions linger in his mind, they'll have to wait. Right now, Emma needs him. And whether she's truly his daughter or not, he can't abandon her, not tonight, not like this. James, firmly, come with me. Emma looks up, startled by the suddenness of his words. Her green eyes widen, searching his face for reassurance. Emma, what? Where are we going? James stands, pulling out his wallet and tossing a few bills onto the table to cover their drinks. He offers her a small, reassuring smile, though it doesn't quite reach his eyes. James, somewhere safe. You're coming with me. Before she can protest, or perhaps thank him, he signals for the valet outside. As they step out into the crisp Manhattan evening, the city buzzes around them, oblivious to the seismic shift occurring within James's world. His sleek black Mercedes awaits curbside, its polished exterior gleaming under the streetlights. James opens the passenger door, gesturing for Emma to climb inside. She hesitates only briefly before doing so, settling into the leather seat with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Once she's buckled in, James slides behind the wheel, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. For a moment, neither of them speaks. The hum of the engine fills the silence as James glances at Emma out of the corner of his eye. She sits quietly, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her expression unreadable. It strikes him how composed she seems, despite everything. James, softly, are you okay? Emma nods, though her voice betrays a hint of uncertainty. Emma, I think so. I didn't expect this. James chuckles dryly, more to himself than to her. James, neither did I. He pulls away from the curb, merging smoothly into traffic. The streets of Manhattan blur past them, neon lights reflecting off the windshield. James's mind races ahead, already planning his next moves. He'll need to call his assistant first thing tomorrow morning, rearrange meetings, clear his schedule. There are questions that need answers, DNA tests, legal paperwork, logistics. But none of that matters right now. Right now, all that matters is the little girl sitting beside him. James glances at her again, taking in the way her wavy brown hair falls across her shoulders, the faint smudge of dirt on her cheek. She looks so small in the oversized seat, so vulnerable. Yet there's a strength in her too, a quiet determination that mirrors Claire's spirit in ways James can't ignore. His chest tightens with emotion, a cocktail of guilt, grief, and something else he hasn't felt in years, responsibility. James, to himself, my world has just changed forever. Emma turns to look at him, her green eyes meeting his briefly before returning to the window. Outside, the city stretches endlessly, alive with possibility. Inside the car, however, two lives are colliding, reshaping each other in ways neither could have anticipated. The elevator doors slide open with a soft chime, revealing James's penthouse, a sprawling space perched high above Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows offer breathtaking views of the city skyline, illuminated by the glow of countless lights below. The interior is sleek and minimalist, every piece of furniture carefully chosen for its functionality rather than comfort. Chrome accents gleam under recessed lighting, and the polished marble floors reflect the faint shimmer of the night outside. Emma steps out of the elevator hesitantly, her sneakers making barely a sound on the smooth surface. She looks around, taking in the vast emptiness of the room. There are no family photos, no knickknacks, no signs of life beyond the cold precision of design. Her small frame seems almost swallowed by the scale of the space. Emma, quietly, this place is, really quiet. James freezes for a moment, her words striking a chord he hadn't noticed before. Quiet? Yes, it was always quiet here. He'd never thought about it, hadn't cared, but now, standing beside Emma, he realizes just how sterile his home feels. It's not a place meant for living, it's a place meant for existing. Efficient, controlled, devoid of warmth. James clears his throat, shaking off the unsettling realization. James, it's late. Let me show you to your room. He leads her down a hallway lined with closed doors, each one leading to spaces that rarely see use. At the end of the hall, he pushes open a door to reveal a guest room. Like the rest of the penthouse, it's immaculate, pristine white linens cover the bed, and a single lamp casts a soft glow over the otherwise impersonal decor. A vase of fresh flowers sits on the nightstand, likely placed there earlier by the housekeeping staff who maintain the apartment in his absence. Emma steps inside cautiously, her fingers brushing against the edge of the bedspread. She turns back to James, her expression unreadable. "Emma, is this where I'll sleep?" James nods, gesturing toward the bed. "James, yes. It's comfortable. If you need anything, my room is just down the hall." Emma doesn't respond immediately. Instead, she walks to the window, peering out at the glittering city below. For a moment, she seems lost in thought, her reflection ghost-like against the glass. "Emma," softly, "do you live here alone?" The question catches James off guard. He hesitates before answering, unsure of how much to reveal, or perhaps unwilling to confront the truth himself. "James, yes. I've always lived alone." Emma glances at him over her shoulder, her green eyes searching his face. "Emma, don't you get lonely?" "Lonely?" James has never allowed himself to consider such a thing. Loneliness is a weakness, an indulgence he can't afford. Yet now, standing in this cold, empty room with Emma watching him so intently, he wonders if maybe she's right. "James," evading, "it's just the way I prefer it." Emma doesn't press further. Instead, she turns back to the window, her gaze drifting once more to the cityscape beyond. After a long pause, she speaks again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Emma, are you going to keep me?" The question hits James like a freight train, stopping him dead in his tracks. Keep her? The idea is overwhelming, terrifying even. He's spent his entire life building walls around himself, protecting his independence, his freedom. And now, here is this child, a stranger yet somehow familiar, asking him to step into a role he's never imagined for himself. James struggles to find the right words, but they elude him. How can he promise something he isn't sure he's capable of giving? "James," after a long silence, "I don't know, Emma. But for tonight, you're safe here. That's all that matters." Emma nods slowly, accepting his answer without argument. Whether she believes him or simply doesn't want to push, James can't tell. He watches as she climbs onto the bed, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Despite the luxury of the room, she looks small and vulnerable, like a bird caught in a gilded cage. "James," gently, "try to get some rest. We'll figure things out tomorrow." Emma gives him a faint smile, though it doesn't quite reach her eyes. "Emma, good night, Mr. Donovan." James flinches slightly at the formality of her address. It feels wrong, distant, especially coming from someone who might be his daughter. "James," softly, "you can call me James." Emma nods again, closing her eyes as the exhaustion of the day finally overtakes her. As James steps out of the room, closing the door softly behind him, he leans against the wall, exhaling deeply. His penthouse feels colder than ever, the silence pressing down on him like a weight. For the first time in years, he feels truly alone, not because there's no one else here, but because there's someone who needs him, and he has no idea what to do next. The first rays of sunlight filter through the floor-to-ceiling windows of James's penthouse, casting long shadows across the sleek marble floors. The city below is just beginning to stir, but inside the apartment, an unusual quiet lingers. James wakes earlier than usual, his mind restless after a night spent tossing and turning. He moves through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, pouring himself a cup of black coffee before glancing toward the hallway where Emma sleeps. To his surprise, she's already awake. James spots her in the guest room when he passes by, kneeling on the floor beside her small backpack. Her few belongings, a change of clothes, a stuffed rabbit missing one ear, and a tattered notebook, are laid out neatly as she folds each item with care. She looks up when she hears him approach, offering a shy smile. "Emma, good morning." James nods, setting his coffee mug down on the dresser. "James, morning. Did you sleep okay?" Emma shrugs lightly, her gaze dropping back to the shirt she's folding. "Emma, it was fine. The bed's really soft." Her tone is polite but reserved, and James can sense the uncertainty lingering beneath her words. He hesitates for a moment, unsure of what to say next. This isn't territory he's familiar with, small talk, comfort, connection. But something about the way she focuses so intently on her task tugs at him, urging him to try. "James, hungry? I thought I'd make breakfast." Emma raises an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Emma, you cook?" James smirks faintly, though there's no real humor in it. "James, I'll give it my best shot." In the kitchen, James pulls out ingredients for pancakes, flour, eggs, milk, syrup, and sets them on the counter. He hasn't made breakfast in years, not since his college days when late-night study sessions demanded quick meals. Still, he figures it can't be that hard. How difficult could pancakes possibly be? As it turns out, very. The batter is too thick, then too runny. The pan overheats, sending smoke billowing into the air and triggering the fire alarm. James curses under his breath, waving a towel frantically to clear the haze while Emma watches from the doorway, her hands clasped over her mouth to stifle her laughter. Finally, after several failed attempts, James manages to produce a stack of charred, misshapen pancakes that barely resemble food. He slides them onto a plate and sets it on the table with a sheepish expression. "James, well, they're edible." "Sort of." Emma sits down cautiously, poking at the pancakes with her fork. Then, unable to hold it in any longer, she bursts into giggles, her laughter filling the sterile space like music. "Emma," grinning, "you don't seem like a pancake person." James freezes, caught off guard by her comment. For a moment, he doesn't know whether to feel insulted or amused. But then he notices the genuine warmth in her smile, the way her green eyes sparkle with mischief, and something inside him shifts. James, dryly, noted. "Next time, we're ordering takeout." Emma laughs again, shaking her head. "Emma, deal." They eat in relative silence after that, though the tension from the previous night has softened considerably. James watches Emma as she nibbles at her pancake, her movements deliberate and careful. Despite the absurdity of the meal, she seems content, almost relaxed. For the first time, James allows himself to truly look at her, not as a disruption to his life, not as a problem to solve, but as a person. A child who's lost her mother, who's been thrust into an unfamiliar world with nothing but a backpack and a fragile hope that he might accept her. He feels a crack forming in the walls he's built around himself, a fissure he isn't sure how to repair, or if he even wants to. "James," softly, "Emma." She looks up, meeting his gaze curiously. "Emma, yeah?" James pauses, searching for the right words. "James, if you need anything, anything at all, you tell me, okay?" Emma studies him for a moment, as though trying to gauge whether he means it. Then she nods slowly, her lips curving into a tentative smile. "Emma, okay." The moment passes, but its impact lingers. As they finish their makeshift breakfast, James realizes something he hadn't expected. Despite the chaos of the morning, despite the question still looming over them both, this feels different. Not perfect, not resolved, but somehow lighter. And for the first time in years, James wonders if maybe, just maybe, he's capable of more than he's ever allowed himself to believe. The morning sun shines brightly as James and Emma step out of the penthouse, heading toward Fifth Avenue. The streets are alive with the hum of activity, tourists snapping photos, street vendors calling out their wares, and the occasional honk of a taxi weaving through traffic. James walks briskly, his hands shoved into the pockets of his tailored coat, while Emma trails slightly behind him, her small fingers clutching the strap of her worn backpack. James glances back at her, noticing how she seems to shrink into herself amidst the bustling crowd. He slows his pace, allowing her to catch up. "James, we're going shopping today. You'll need clothes, supplies, whatever you want." Emma looks up at him, her green eyes wide with surprise. "Emma, for me?" James nods, his tone matter-of-fact but not unkind. "James, yes, for you. We can't have you running around in the same outfit every day." Emma hesitates, her gaze dropping to the ground. "Emma, I don't need much." James sighs inwardly, recognizing the careful restraint in her voice. It's clear she's used to making do with little, perhaps even accustomed to going without. The realization tugs at something deep within him, though he doesn't let it show. "James, let's start with the basics. Clothes, shoes, toiletries. And if there's anything else you'd like, we'll get that too." Emma nods silently, following him into the first store, a high-end boutique filled with racks of designer clothing. The sales associate greets them warmly, offering assistance, but Emma hangs back, overwhelmed by the sheer abundance of options. She moves slowly through the aisles, her fingers brushing against fabrics but never lingering too long. James watches her closely, noting how deliberate she is in her choices. When she finally picks out a few simple items, a pair of jeans, a couple of shirts, and a warm sweater, she turns to him uncertainly. "Emma, is this okay?" James studies the modest selection, then nods. "James, it's fine. If you need more, we'll come back later." They move on to another store, then another, each visit marked by Emma's quiet thoughtfulness. She chooses only what she absolutely needs, refusing to indulge in anything frivolous. Her restraint is admirable but also unsettling, a reminder of just how different their worlds are. Finally, they reach a bookstore tucked between two towering skyscrapers. Its windows are adorned with colorful displays of bestsellers and children's classics, drawing Emma's attention immediately. Her face lights up for the first time since they began their outing, her earlier hesitation melting away as she steps inside. The scent of paper and ink fills the air, mingling with the soft murmur of customers browsing the shelves. Emma wanders through the aisles, her eyes scanning titles with obvious delight. She pauses occasionally, pulling out a book to examine its cover before returning it gently to its place. After several minutes, she approaches James holding 3 books, a mystery novel, a collection of fairy tales, and a guide to constellations. "Emma, tentatively, can I get these?" James raises an eyebrow, surprised by her restraint. "James, only 3? Most kids would grab 10. Emma shrugs, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Emma, books last a long time. I like to read them over and over." Her words strike a chord in James, reminding him of Claire's love for literature and the countless nights she spent curled up with a book. He feels a pang of nostalgia but quickly pushes it aside, focusing instead on the girl standing before him. "James, softly smiling, we'll get more when you finish these." Emma hesitates, clearly torn between gratitude and disbelief. "Emma, really?" James nods, his expression softening. "James, of course. Reading is important. Plus, it seems like something you enjoy." Emma's face breaks into a genuine smile, one that reaches her eyes and makes her look years younger. "Emma, thank you." As they pay for the books and leave the store, James notices a subtle change in Emma's demeanor. She clutches the bag tightly, her steps lighter, her posture less guarded. For the first time since they met, she seems almost hopeful. Walking side by side down the busy street, James finds himself reflecting on the day so far. Shopping wasn't supposed to be meaningful, it was meant to be practical, efficient. Yet here he is, watching Emma marvel at the simplest things, her joy infectious despite everything she's been through. He realizes, perhaps for the first time, that providing for someone isn't just about meeting their needs, it's about understanding what brings them happiness. And in this moment, seeing Emma's quiet delight, James begins to see glimpses of a life he never imagined for himself. The next few days blur together in a whirlwind of tension and uncertainty for James. His mornings are spent juggling phone calls, emails, and meetings while trying to figure out how to incorporate Emma into his meticulously structured life. It's not easy. Every decision feels like walking a tightrope, balancing the demands of his empire with the fragile presence of this child who has suddenly become his responsibility. By midweek, the strain is evident. Dark circles shadow his eyes, and his usually sharp demeanor shows cracks under the weight of doubt. He knows he can't keep going like this, splitting himself between boardrooms and bedtime stories, but he doesn't know what else to do. One afternoon, Daniel Carter, his longtime business partner and confidant, corners him in the office. Daniel is a no-nonsense man in his late 50s, with graying hair and a perpetually skeptical expression. He wastes no time getting to the point. "Daniel, bluntly, James, you need to put her in foster care." James stiffens, his jaw tightening as he looks up from the stack of papers on his desk. "James, excuse me?" Daniel leans forward, resting his palms on the edge of the desk. His tone is firm but not unkind. "Daniel, you're a CEO, James. You run a multi-billion-dollar company. This isn't the time to play house. Let social services handle it, they'll find her a good home." James clenches his fists beneath the table, anger simmering just below the surface. But before he can respond, Daniel continues, his voice softening slightly. "Daniel, look, I get it. She says she's your daughter, and maybe she is. But raising a kid? That's not something you can just jump into. Not with your schedule. Not with everything we've got riding on this merger." James exhales sharply, running a hand over his face. Part of him wants to argue, to defend his decision to keep Emma, but another part wonders if Daniel might be right. What does he know about being a father? About caring for someone so vulnerable, so dependent? For the rest of the day, Daniel's words echo in his mind, gnawing at his resolve. By evening, when he returns to the penthouse, he's exhausted, not just physically but emotionally. The city lights outside the windows seem colder than usual, reflecting the turmoil brewing inside him. Emma greets him quietly when he walks in, her small frame silhouetted against the backdrop of the living room. She's sitting cross-legged on the floor, flipping through one of the books they bought earlier in the week. "Emma," softly, "Hi, James." He forces a smile, though it doesn't quite reach his eyes. "James, hey, Emma. How was your day?" Emma shrugs, closing the book and setting it aside. "Emma, okay, I guess. I read most of the fairy tales." James nods absently, his thoughts still tangled in the conversation with Daniel. He heads to the kitchen to pour himself a drink, needing something, anything, to steady his nerves. As he sips the amber liquid, he glances back at Emma, watching her retreat to her room without another word. Hours later, as James sits in his study reviewing documents, he hears it, a faint whimper drifting down the hallway. At first, he thinks it's nothing, perhaps the wind or a distant sound from outside. But then it comes again, louder this time, a muffled cry followed by soft sobs. Without thinking, James sets down his pen and rises from his chair. He moves silently down the hall, stopping outside Emma's door. Pushing it open gently, he sees her thrashing in her sleep, tears streaming down her cheeks as she mutters incoherently. James hesitates for only a moment before stepping inside. He approaches the bed cautiously, placing a hand on her shoulder to wake her. "James, gently, Emma. Hey, it's okay. Wake up." Her eyes flutter open, wide and frightened, as she gasps for breath. For a second, she seems disoriented, unsure of where she is or who he is. Then recognition dawns, and she throws her arms around him, clinging tightly. Emma, tearfully, I had a bad dream. James freezes, caught off guard by the sudden intimacy of the moment. Slowly, awkwardly, he pats her back, unsure of what else to do. James, it's all right. You're safe now. She pulls away slightly, wiping at her face with the sleeve of her pajamas. Her lower lip trembles as she looks up at him. Emma, can you stay here for a little bit? James hesitates, torn between his discomfort and the pleading look in her eyes. Finally, he nods, sinking onto the edge of the bed. James, sure. Do you want me to read to you? Emma nods eagerly, reaching for the book of fairy tales on her nightstand. She hands it to him, her fingers brushing against his briefly. James opens the book, finding a random page, and begins to read aloud. His voice is low and steady, filling the quiet room with the rhythm of words meant to soothe. As he reads, Emma curls up under the blanket, her breathing gradually evening out. By the time he finishes the story, her eyes are closed, her grip on the stuffed rabbit loosened. He closes the book softly and stands to leave, but before he can step away, her sleepy voice stops him. Emma, drowsily, good night, Dad. The word hits him like a punch to the chest. Dad, it's the first time she's called him that, and it feels both foreign and achingly familiar. He freezes, his heart pounding in his chest, as the weight of the moment settles over him. James, quietly, good night, Emma. As he turns off the lamp and steps out of the room, he realizes something profound. Whether he was ready or not, whether he wanted it or not, he is her father now. And walking away isn't an option, not anymore. The next morning, James wakes to the faint sound of rain tapping against the penthouse windows. The city outside is cloaked in gray, the usual hustle muted by the steady drizzle. He steps into the kitchen to find Emma sitting at the counter, her chin resting on her folded arms as she stares out at the dreary skyline. James pours himself a cup of coffee and joins her, leaning against the counter with his mug in hand. James, gently, you okay? Emma shrugs, her gaze still fixed on the window. Emma, I miss Mom. Her voice is soft, almost too quiet to hear over the patter of rain. But the words carry a weight that fills the room, heavy and unshakable. James sets his mug down, turning to face her fully. James, tell me about her. Emma hesitates, glancing up at him briefly before looking away again. Emma, she was kind and funny. She always knew how to make things better, even when they weren't. Like when I got scared during thunderstorms, she'd tell me it was just the clouds playing hide and seek. A small smile tugs at James's lips, though it doesn't quite mask the sadness in his eyes. James, that sounds like something Claire would say. Emma nods, her fingers tracing patterns on the countertop. Emma, she talked about you sometimes, you know. Not a lot, but enough. She said you were smart and hardworking. That you had big dreams. James feels a lump rise in his throat, guilt tightening its grip around his chest. James, quietly, she never should have had to raise you alone. Emma shakes her head quickly, her voice firm despite the tears welling in her eyes. Emma, don't blame her. She didn't want to bother you. She said you needed to focus on your work, that she understood. The words hit James like a punch to the gut. Bother him? Is that what Claire thought, that being part of her life, part of Emma's life, would be a burden? James exhales sharply, running a hand through his hair. James, she shouldn't have felt that way. You both deserved more than that. Emma doesn't respond immediately. Instead, she pushes herself off the stool and walks to the living room, retrieving her backpack from the couch. She rummages inside for a moment before pulling out a crumpled piece of paper. Emma, there's something I've been meaning to show you. It's why I came to find you. She hands him the paper, her hands trembling slightly. James unfolds it carefully, recognizing Claire's handwriting instantly. His breath catches as he scans the note, a short, heartfelt message addressed to him, written years ago. Claire's letter, read aloud by James. Dear James. If you're reading this, it means our paths crossed again. Maybe fate finally decided we weren't done with each other. I don't know if you'll believe me, but there's someone who shares your birthmark, and your DNA. Her name is Emma. She's beautiful, just like you. Please don't hate me for keeping her from you all these years. I only wanted what was best for her. For us. If you ever meet her, please give her a chance. She deserves to know you, even if I couldn't bring myself to ask, Love, Claire. James's vision blurs as tears threaten to spill over. He folds the letter carefully, clutching it tightly in his fist. James, hoarsely, why didn't she send this? Emma shrugs, her own eyes glistening. Emma, I think she was scared. Scared you wouldn't care. Or worse, that you'd resent her for waiting so long. James shakes his head, overwhelmed by emotion. James, she was wrong. About everything. You deserve to know me, Emma. And I deserve to know you. Emma looks up at him, searching his face for reassurance. Emma, do you mean that? James nods, his voice thick with sincerity. James, yes. I do. Later that afternoon, after the rain has slowed to a drizzle, James suggests visiting Claire's old house. Emma agrees hesitantly, clearly unsure of what to expect. When they arrive, the modest suburban home feels eerily familiar yet foreign. The garden is overgrown, and the paint on the front door is peeling, but it still holds traces of Claire's presence, her warmth, her love. Inside, Emma leads James to her mother's study, a small room filled with books and photographs. She opens a drawer and pulls out a stack of letters tied together with a faded ribbon. Emma, these are all for you. She wrote them but never sent them. James takes the bundle, his hands shaking as he unties the ribbon. Each letter is dated, chronicling moments of Emma's life, the day she took her first steps, her first day of school, birthdays, holidays. Claire poured her heart into every word, capturing the joy and challenges of raising their daughter alone. As James reads through the letters, tears stream down his face unchecked. He sees now how much Claire loved him, how much she sacrificed to protect him from the responsibility she feared he wasn't ready for. But most of all, he sees the truth: Emma had always been his, whether he knew it or not. By the time they leave the house, the rain has stopped completely, leaving the world washed clean. Standing on the porch, James turns to Emma, his expression resolute. James, we'll figure this out, Emma. Together. No matter what. Emma smiles faintly, her green eyes shining with hope. Emma, okay. For the first time since their lives collided, James feels a sense of purpose, not just as a CEO, but as a father. Weeks pass, and life begins to settle into a fragile rhythm for James and Emma. The penthouse, once cold and impersonal, starts to feel warmer, less like a showroom and more like a home. Emma's laughter echoes through the halls, her presence slowly chipping away at the walls James has built around himself. For the first time in years, he feels something akin to peace. But that peace is shattered one afternoon when James receives an unexpected letter from his lawyer. He sits in his study, the document spread out before him, his jaw tightening with every word he reads. A distant relative of Claire's, a cousin named Margaret, has filed for custody of Emma, claiming she's better suited to provide a stable environment than a workaholic CEO who barely knows the child. James slams the paper down on the desk, anger coursing through him. How dare someone try to take Emma away? She's his daughter, whether they share blood or not. And after everything they've been through, he isn't about to let anyone disrupt the fragile bond they're building. That evening, as Emma colors quietly at the kitchen table, James approaches her cautiously. He kneels beside her chair, meeting her gaze with a seriousness that makes her pause mid-stroke. "James, Emma, there's something I need to tell you." Emma sets her crayon down, her green eyes wide with curiosity. "Emma, what is it?" James takes a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "James, someone else wants to take care of you. They think they can give you a better life than I can." Emma's expression shifts from confusion to alarm. "Emma, you mean, you're sending me away?" James shakes his head firmly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "James, no. Absolutely not. I'm going to fight for you, Emma. You're my daughter, and I'm not letting anyone take you from me." Emma stares at him, her lower lip trembling. "Emma, promise?" James meets her gaze without hesitation. "James, I promise." The courtroom is stark and sterile, its fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across the rows of wooden benches. James sits stiffly beside his lawyer, his suit immaculate but his demeanor tense. Across the aisle, Margaret sits with her own attorney, her posture rigid and self-assured. She's a tall woman in her late 40s, with sharp features and an air of entitlement that grates on James's nerves. Emma sits between them, clutching a stuffed rabbit tightly in her lap. Her small frame seems even smaller in the cavernous space, her green eyes darting nervously between James and Margaret. The judge enters, and the room falls silent. After a brief introduction, the proceedings begin. Margaret's lawyer speaks first, painting James as an unfit guardian, a man too consumed by his career to prioritize a child's needs. Margaret's lawyer, Mr. Donovan, may have wealth and resources, Your Honor, but money cannot replace stability, love, or attention. My client has raised children of her own and is well equipped to provide Emma with the nurturing environment she deserves. James clenches his fists beneath the table, forcing himself to remain composed. When it's his turn to speak, he rises slowly, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "James, Your Honor, I won't deny that I wasn't part of Emma's life until recently. But that doesn't change the fact that she's my daughter. Blood or no blood, she belongs with me. I've spent years chasing success, building a life I thought would protect me from loss. But now I realize what truly matters, it's her. She's my family. And I will not abandon her." He pauses, glancing briefly at Emma, whose eyes are fixed on him, brimming with hope. "James, I may not be perfect, but I'll do whatever it takes to give her the life she deserves. To be the father she needs. That's a promise I intend to keep." The courtroom is silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Even Margaret seems momentarily unsettled, her confident facade faltering. When the judge finally speaks, her tone is measured but firm. "Judge, this court recognizes the complexity of this case. However, the primary consideration must always be the best interest of the child. Based on the evidence presented, and Mr. Donovan's clear commitment to taking responsibility for Emma, I grant him full custody." Relief washes over James, so powerful it nearly buckles his knees. He exhales sharply, turning to Emma with a smile that reaches his eyes for the first time in weeks. "James," softly, "we did it, Emma. You're staying with me." Emma leaps from her seat, throwing her arms around him. Emma, whispering, "Thank you, Dad." As they leave the courthouse together, hand in hand, James feels a sense of purpose stronger than anything he's ever known. Money, power, success, they pale in comparison to the love of a child. And for the first time, James understands what it means to truly live. Life after the custody battle settles into a new rhythm for James and Emma. The penthouse feels warmer now, filled with the sounds of laughter, the faint hum of music from Emma's room, and the occasional clatter of dishes as they cook dinner together. James has started to adapt to his role as a father, helping Emma with her homework, reading bedtime stories, and even attempting to bake cookies, with mixed results. But despite these small victories, James still carries the weight of his responsibilities at work. His company is on the verge of finalizing a multi-billion-dollar merger, a deal that could cement his legacy as one of the most successful CEOs in the industry. It's everything he's worked for, everything he's sacrificed for. Yet, as the days pass, he finds himself increasingly torn between the demands of his career and the needs of his daughter. One evening, as James sits in his study reviewing documents for the merger, Emma appears in the doorway, clutching a piece of paper. Her expression is hesitant, almost guilty. "Emma, James. I mean, Dad? Can I talk to you?" James looks up, setting the papers aside. He gestures for her to come closer. "James, of course. What's on your mind?" Emma steps into the room, holding out the paper. It's a flyer for a school science fair. "Emma, I made it to the finals. They said parents are invited to come watch. But if you're too busy, I understand." Her voice trails off, and James can hear the uncertainty beneath her words. She's trying to be brave, to not impose, but he knows how much it means to her. James takes the flyer, studying it carefully. The date is circled in red, just 2 days before the merger's closing meeting, a meeting he's expected to attend in person. "James," softly, "this is incredible, Emma. I'm proud of you." Emma smiles faintly, though her eyes remain cautious. "Emma, thanks. You don't have to come if you can't. I know you're really busy." James hesitates, his mind racing. He's spent years prioritizing work over everything else, convinced that success would bring fulfillment. But now, looking at Emma's hopeful face, he wonders if he's been chasing the wrong thing all along. The next morning, James arrives at the office early, his decision already made. He calls an emergency meeting with his board of directors, gathering them in the sleek conference room overlooking Manhattan. The atmosphere is tense as James stands at the head of the table, his expression resolute. "James, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. I have something important to discuss." His announcement sends ripples through the room. Whispers break out as the board members exchange puzzled glances. Board member number 1, "Is everything all right, James?" James nods, his tone calm but firm. "James, everything is fine. But I've made a decision, one that I believe is best for me and my family." He pauses, letting the weight of his words sink in. "James, I'm stepping away from the merger negotiations. Effective immediately." The room erupts in murmurs of disbelief. One of the senior executives leans forward, his voice sharp with concern. "Senior executive, James, this deal could redefine our company's future. Are you sure about this?" James meets his gaze without flinching. "James, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. For years, I've poured everything I have into this company, my time, my energy, my soul. But I've realized something recently, none of it matters if I lose sight of what truly matters. My daughter needs me. And I won't let her down again." The room falls silent, the gravity of his words hanging in the air. Some of the board members nod in understanding, while others exchange skeptical glances. But James doesn't care. This isn't about them, it's about Emma. That evening, James returns home to find Emma curled up on the couch, flipping through one of her books. She looks up as he enters, her green eyes lighting up with curiosity. "Emma, you're home early." James smiles, sitting beside her. "James, I wanted to spend some time with you." Emma tilts her head, studying him closely. "Emma, what happened at work today? You seem different." James exhales slowly, choosing his words carefully. "James, I made a decision. A big one." Emma's brow furrows. "Emma, what kind of decision?" James reaches out, placing a hand on hers. "James, I walked away from the merger, the billion-dollar deal everyone's been talking about." Emma's eyes widen in shock. "Emma, you gave up your job for me?" James shakes his head firmly. James, no. I didn't give up my job. I gave up the job that kept me from you. There's a difference. Emma stares at him, tears welling in her eyes. Emma, why would you do that? James's voice softens, filled with sincerity. James, because you're my family, Emma. And nothing, not money, not success, not anything, is more important than that. Emma throws her arms around him, hugging him tightly. Emma, whispering, "Thank you, Dad." As they sit there together, James feels a sense of peace he hasn't known in years. The pursuit of wealth and power no longer holds the same allure. Instead, he finds fulfillment in the simple joy of being present, for Emma, for himself, for the life they're building together. And for the first time, James realizes that true success isn't measured by what you achieve, it's measured by who you love, and who loves you back. Weeks have passed since James walked away from the billion-dollar merger, and while the decision still reverberates through the business world, his focus has shifted entirely to Emma. He's learning how to be a father, how to listen, how to comfort, how to show up when it matters most. But old habits die hard, and James still struggles with expressing emotions openly. Words like, "I love you," feel foreign on his tongue, even though he knows they're true. One Saturday morning, as sunlight streams through the penthouse windows, James approaches Emma with an idea that's been brewing in his mind for days. She's sitting at the kitchen counter, sketching in her notebook, her wavy brown hair falling over her shoulders. James, "Hey, Emma. Got a minute?" Emma looks up, her green eyes curious. Emma, "Sure. What's up?" James hesitates briefly before speaking, his tone measured but warm. James, I've been thinking, your room. It's still so plain, so impersonal. I want to change that. Let's renovate it, make it yours. Emma blinks in surprise, clearly caught off guard by the suggestion. Emma, really? You'd do that? James nods, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. James, of course. It's your space. You should feel comfortable there. We can pick out colors, furniture, whatever you want. Emma's face lights up with excitement, though she quickly tries to mask it, as if afraid to get her hopes up too high. Emma, what about work? Don't you have meetings or something? James shakes his head firmly. James, not today. Today is for us. Later that afternoon, James and Emma visit a home decor store downtown. The aisles are filled with swatches of fabric, paint samples, and furniture displays, each one more vibrant than the last. Emma walks slowly, her fingers trailing over the textures and patterns as she considers her options. James follows behind her, watching silently as she pauses in front of a wall of paint chips. Her brow furrows in concentration as she flips through the colors, searching for the perfect shade. James, gently, any ideas yet? Emma nods, pulling out a soft blue swatch. Emma, this one. It was Mom's favorite color. James feels a pang of emotion at her words, but he keeps his expression steady, offering her an encouraging smile. James, blue it is, then. Your mom had great taste. Emma smiles faintly, clutching the swatch tightly in her hand. Emma, do you think she'd like it? James places a hand on her shoulder, his voice soft but certain. James, I know she would. She'd be proud of you, Emma. Of everything you've done. Emma looks down, her cheeks flushing slightly, but she doesn't argue. Instead, she turns back to the shelves, picking out curtains, rugs, and decorations that match the theme. As they shop together, James notices how animated she becomes, her earlier hesitation melting away with each new choice. Over the next few weeks, the renovation transforms Emma's room into a cozy sanctuary. The walls are painted a soothing shade of blue, accented with white trim and gold fixtures. A canopy bed sits in the center of the room, draped with sheer curtains that catch the light during the day. Shelves line one wall, filled with books, photos, and trinkets that reflect Emma's personality. On the final day of the project, James stands in the doorway, watching as Emma explores her newly decorated space. She runs her fingers along the edges of the shelves, admires the framed picture of her and Claire on the nightstand, and flops onto the bed with a contented sigh. Emma, grinning, "It's perfect." "Thank you, Dad." James steps inside, leaning against the doorframe. "James, you picked most of it. I just helped bring it to life." Emma shakes her head, her expression earnest. "Emma, no, you did more than that. You made me feel like I belong here." Her words strike a chord deep within James, filling him with a mix of pride and humility. He crosses the room, sitting beside her on the bed. "James, quietly, you do belong here, Emma. This is your home now. And I'm glad you're part of it." Emma leans into him, resting her head on his shoulder. For a moment, neither of them speaks, simply enjoying the quiet companionship. Finally, Emma breaks the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. "Emma, I love you, Dad." James freezes, the weight of her words sinking in. He swallows hard, his throat tight with emotion. "James, softly, I love you too, Emma." It's the first time he's said those words aloud, and though they feel unfamiliar, they also feel right, as if saying them completes a piece of himself he didn't realize was missing. As they sit together in the warmth of the newly renovated room, James realizes that this is what family feels like. Not perfection, not ease, but connection. Love. A bond that grows stronger with every challenge faced and overcome. And for the first time in his life, James understands that success isn't about wealth or power, it's about creating a place where someone feels safe, loved, and truly at home. The weeks turn into months, and James's life begins to take on a rhythm he never imagined possible. Gone are the days of endless work meetings stretching late into the night, replaced by routines that revolve around Emma. It's not always easy, balancing the demands of his company with the needs of a growing child is a constant challenge, but James has never felt more fulfilled. Each evening, as the city lights flicker to life outside the penthouse windows, James makes it a point to sit with Emma in her room. The ritual started shortly after the renovation, almost by accident. One night, as she struggled to fall asleep, James picked up one of her books and began reading aloud. The sound of his voice seemed to calm her, and soon, it became a nightly tradition. Reading to Emma every night. On this particular evening, James knocks softly on Emma's bedroom door before stepping inside. She's already tucked under the covers, her stuffed rabbit resting beside her, and a book lies open on her lap. "Emma," smiling, "I was waiting for you." James chuckles, pulling up a chair beside her bed. "James, sorry I'm late. Work ran longer than I expected." Emma shrugs, clearly forgiving. "Emma, it's okay. I saved the best part of the story for you." James raises an eyebrow, intrigued. "James, oh? And what part is that?" Emma hands him the book, pointing to a chapter titled The Secret Garden. "Emma, this one. It's about finding something beautiful where you least expect it." James nods, opening the book to the marked page. As he begins to read, his deep, steady voice fills the room, weaving a tale of discovery and wonder. Emma listens intently, her green eyes reflecting the soft glow of the bedside lamp. When he finishes the chapter, she yawns, her eyelids growing heavy. "Emma," sleepily, "will you read again tomorrow?" James smiles, tucking the blanket around her shoulders. "James, every night, Emma. That's our deal." She nods contentedly, her breathing slowing as sleep takes hold. James, whispering, "Good night, sweetheart." Emma, barely audible, "Night, Dad." As James turns off the lamp and steps out of the room, he feels a quiet sense of accomplishment. These moments, simple, unassuming, are building something far greater than any business deal ever could: trust, love, and a foundation for their future together. Taking her to school. Mornings have also changed dramatically for James. Once reserved for early conference calls and strategy sessions, they now begin with the hum of traffic and the chatter of students heading to class. Each weekday, James drives Emma to school in his sleek black car, navigating the bustling streets of Manhattan with practiced ease. One crisp autumn morning, as they approach the school gates, Emma hesitates before unbuckling her seatbelt. "Emma, Dad, do you think people notice when parents drop off their kids?" James glances at her, sensing the underlying insecurity in her question. "James, why? Are you worried someone will say something?" Emma shrugs, her fingers twisting the strap of her backpack nervously. "Emma, I don't want anyone to think it's weird that you're suddenly here all the time." James reaches over, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "James, it's not weird, Emma. It's normal. And if anyone says otherwise, they're wrong. Being here for you isn't something to be ashamed of, it's something to be proud of." Emma looks at him, her expression softening. "Emma, thanks, Dad." James gives her a small smile. "James, now go on. Have a good day. I'll pick you up after school." Emma nods, grabbing her bag and stepping out of the car. Before closing the door, she leans back in briefly. "Emma, love you." James grins, warmth spreading through his chest. "James, love you too, Emma." As he watches her walk toward the school entrance, her wavy brown hair catching the sunlight, James feels a surge of pride. This, being present, showing up, is what being a father means. Balancing work and fatherhood. Back at the office, James has implemented new strategies to ensure he can balance his responsibilities without neglecting Emma. He's delegated more tasks to trusted executives, streamlined operations, and set strict boundaries on his availability. His assistant, Sarah, keeps a detailed schedule that prioritizes both work commitments and family time. One afternoon, as James reviews quarterly reports in his study, Emma bursts through the door, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Emma, guess what?" James looks up, amused by her enthusiasm. "James, what is it?" Emma holds up a colorful ribbon, her grin wide. "Emma, I won first place in the science fair. My project on renewable energy got the highest score." James sets his pen down, rising from his chair to give her a proper hug. "James, that's incredible, Emma. I'm so proud of you." Emma beams, clearly thrilled by his reaction. "Emma, do you think Mom would have liked it?" James nods, his voice gentle but sincere. "James, she would have loved it. Just like I do." Emma hugs him tightly, her joy infectious. "Emma, thanks for letting me try my own ideas instead of helping me too much." James ruffles her hair affectionately. "James, you didn't need my help, kiddo. You've got talent and determination. That's all you need." After a few more minutes of celebration, Emma heads off to call Miss Karen, the kind neighbor who had cared for her before James entered her life. Watching her go, James reflects on how far they've come. Balancing work and fatherhood isn't perfect, it never will be, but it's worth every moment of effort. A new definition of success. Later that evening, as James sits alone in his study, he flips through old photos of Claire and Emma. Memories flood back, reminding him of the years he missed and the choices he made. But instead of regret, he feels gratitude, for the second chance he's been given, for the daughter who's teaching him how to love again, and for the realization that success isn't measured by wealth or power. It's measured by the laughter echoing through the halls of his once cold penthouse, by the bedtime stories shared under soft lamplight, by the morning spent driving Emma to school. James whispers to himself, a faint smile playing on his lips. James, this is what home feels like. And for the first time in his life, James Donovan knows he's exactly where he's meant to be. The evening settles over Manhattan, the city bathed in the golden hues of twilight. Inside the penthouse, the hum of distant traffic blends with the soft rustle of pages turning. James sits beside Emma's bed, a worn copy of Charlotte's Web resting in his hands. The ritual is familiar now, reading together before bedtime, but tonight feels different, quieter somehow, as if the world outside has paused to let this moment breathe. James reads aloud, his voice steady and warm, bringing the story to life for Emma. She listens intently, her green eyes reflecting the glow of the bedside lamp. Occasionally, she interrupts with a question or comment, her curiosity sparking small conversations between them. Emma, do you think Charlotte was scared when she knew her time was almost up? James pauses, considering the question carefully. James, maybe. But I think she was more focused on leaving something behind, something meaningful. Like her friendship with Wilbur. Emma nods thoughtfully, her gaze drifting to the ceiling. Emma, I think Mom was like that too. She always wanted to leave good things behind, for me, and for you. James swallows hard, the mention of Claire stirring emotions he keeps carefully guarded. He reaches out, brushing a strand of wavy brown hair from Emma's face. James, softly, she did, Emma. She left us each other. Emma smiles faintly, her expression tinged with both sadness and gratitude. Emma, yeah. And that's pretty amazing. James closes the book, setting it aside on the nightstand. Leaning forward, he smooths the blanket around her shoulders, tucking her in snugly. James, all right, kiddo. Time to sleep. Emma yawns, snuggling deeper into the pillows. Just as James is about to rise, she grabs his hand, stopping him. Emma, whispering, "Thank you, Dad." Her words are simple, yet they carry the weight of everything they've been through together, the struggles, the doubts, the moments of connection that have slowly built their bond. James feels a lump rise in his throat, but he forces a smile, squeezing her hand gently. James, you don't have to thank me, Emma. I'm just glad I get to be here, for you. Emma's eyelids flutter closed, her breathing growing softer as sleep begins to take hold. James watches her for a moment, marveling at how much she's changed him. This little girl, with her piercing green eyes and quiet strength, has reshaped his entire world without even realizing it. He leans down, pressing a kiss to her forehead. James, softly, good night, sweetheart. Standing, he turns off the lamp, plunging the room into a gentle darkness illuminated only by the faint glow of the city lights filtering through the window. As he steps toward the doorway, he glances back one last time, committing the image to memory, Emma asleep, peaceful and safe, surrounded by the warmth of a home they've built together. Closing the door softly behind him, James lingers in the hallway, his thoughts swirling. For years, he had defined success by numbers, by deals closed, profits earned, accolades received. He had believed wealth and power were the ultimate measures of a man's worth. But standing here now, in the quiet stillness of the penthouse, he realizes how wrong he had been. Money could buy comfort, luxury, even admiration, but it couldn't buy love, trust, or belonging. Those things came not from boardrooms or bank accounts, but from moments like these, reading stories, sharing laughter, being present. James exhales slowly, a faint smile playing on his lips as clarity washes over him. James, to himself, I wasn't truly rich, until now. Walking to the living room, he sinks onto the couch, gazing out at the glittering skyline beyond the windows. The city is alive with energy, its pulse relentless and unyielding. Yet within these walls, there's a calm, a sense of purpose, that James has never known before. For so long, he had chased success, believing it would fill the void inside him. But now, looking back on the journey that brought him to this moment, the shock of meeting Emma, the legal battles, the sacrifices, he understands that true fulfillment comes not from what you achieve, but from who you become along the way. And in becoming a father, James has found something far greater than wealth or power: a family. A home. A reason to keep showing up, day after day, no matter how hard it gets. As the city lights twinkle outside, James allows himself to sit quietly, savoring the peace he's worked so hard to create. It's imperfect, unpredictable, and sometimes overwhelming, but it's real. And for the first time in his life, James knows he wouldn't trade it for anything. At its heart, this story is about transformation, not the kind that happens overnight, but the kind that unfolds gradually, shaped by choices, sacrifices, and moments of vulnerability. James Donovan began as a man who believed success was measured by wealth and power, only to discover that true richness lies in connection, love, and family. Through Emma, he learned that being present matters more than being perfect, that showing up, even when it's hard, is what builds trust, and that the most meaningful legacies aren't built in boardrooms, but in the quiet, everyday acts of care and devotion. Emma, too, teaches us something profound: resilience. Despite losing her mother, facing uncertainty, and navigating a new life with a father she barely knew, she never stopped hoping for a place to belong. Her courage reminds us that even in the face of loss, there is always room for love, and that sometimes, the people we need most are closer than we think. This story challenges us to reflect on our own lives. Are we chasing the right things? Are we building connections that truly matter? And are we brave enough to embrace change, even when it feels uncomfortable or unfamiliar? If this story resonated with you, if it made you think, feel, or see the world a little differently, we invite you to join us for more. Every week, we bring you stories that explore the complexities of human relationships, the beauty of second chances, and the power of love to transform lives. Don't miss out. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when our next story goes live. Because every great story deserves an audience, and we'd love for you to be part of ours. Thank you for watching, and remember, the richest life isn't the one with the most possessions, it's the one filled with the deepest connections.